welcome everybody. We are delighted to see all of you attend this panel, which is the second event in the series of how to join the quantum workforce. My name is Florian Karl. I'm the manager of the Yale Quantum Institute, and I'll be one of the moderators for this panel. We are delighted to continue this series, which is organized jointly by the Engineering Workforce Development of the Center for Quantum Network in Arizona and the Yale Quantum Institute in Connecticut. So this is the second panel, and today we are focusing on how to prepare for grad school. We wanted to offer this panel since building quantum technology requires a lot of people with different backgrounds. We need physicists, we need electrical engineer, we need computer scientists, software engineer, chemists, and it can be really overwhelming to consider a career in quantum information. So today we will hear from grad students and grad school administrator and dean, and what it's like to work in quantum and get advice on how to navigate the various pathways to do a career in the field of quantum science and information. I would like to introduce my colleague Russell Balliet, who is the assistant director of the Center for Quantum Network and will serve as a co-moderator. And so I will let him introduce himself briefly before we welcome our panelists.
Yep. So thanks, Florian. So like I said, I'm the assistant director for engineering workforce development for the Center of Quantum Networks. A lot of you are already familiar with me. And I'm also managing a couple summer programs this year, RUs and RET. So I'll be moderating as well and might chime in with my graduate school stories. Thanks, Florian.
So before we introduce all the panelists today, some technical details for the panel. So this event is recorded and will be available on demand on both of our institute's YouTube channels. Only the panelists can talk, and so you are able to ask all your questions in the Q&A panel underneath. You have two speech bubbles. If you click on it, you can ask your question, and we will take this question in priority. And then since we cannot see you, we want to learn a little bit more about you. So we should have on your screen a poll that just popped in. So feel free to answer that, and that will allow us to target our conversation to answer most of the question and see who's the audience today. Okay, so moving on, let's welcome our panelists. You can turn on your webcams, and we're going to start the introduction. So let's start by, let's do Emily. Do you want to introduce yourself? So you can talk a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to go into the quantum fields and what it's like to be in grad school.
Okay, hi, I'm Emily Van Milligen. I'm a fourth-year graduate student at the University of Arizona, where I'm currently getting my PhD in physics. I work in Saikat Guha's Quantum Photonics Applications group. He's actually in the optics department, which is nice because at the U of A, you're encouraged to work with professors in different departments than what you are in. And I primarily focus on studying the behavior of quantum networks. So I've been interested in quantum mechanics since I went to undergrad at Tufts University. And so I really enjoyed my undergrad classes, and I just knew I wanted to take more. I didn't really know if I loved research or what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to continue on to grad school because I wanted to learn more about the field and see what opportunities were out there. And it was a really nice fit going to the University of Arizona because at least in the physics department, they give you a couple years to jump around groups and find your actual fit. So it's very flexible, and it's nice because as I was working towards completing my master's, taking my classes, I was getting to sample all these different groups, and I found my home with Professor Saikat. And I really enjoy working with him. I think it's fun because the whole quantum world plays by a different set of rules than the world we interact with on a day-to-day basis. And so that kind of just turns everything into a giant puzzle for me. So it's not really so much work as it is fun.
Thank you. Connor, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Connor Ham. I am Well, no longer a graduate student at Yale University. I actually just defended my thesis a couple of weeks ago. So I just finished up after 5 years at Yale. I was advised there by Professor Steve Gervin, and also co-advised by Professor Liang Zhang at the University of Chicago. So my journey into quantum was perhaps a little bit more meandering. I definitely didn't know starting out even that I wanted to do physics, let alone quantum information. When I started my undergraduate at Duke University, I actually thought I wanted to go be a medical doctor, but lo and behold, there were no spots available in the first year bio class, and so I took physics instead. And then from there, I realized that that was a subject I think I liked a lot more. So I kept taking physics courses and so on and so forth until I found myself in quantum mechanics in my junior year. And once I'd taken quantum, it was really kind of a no going back moment. I sort of tried to shift my research interests in that direction and learn more and more about the field. But even by the time it came to apply to graduate school, I'd done some research broadly in the field of quantum physics, but nothing with respect to, say, quantum computing or quantum information. And so it really took me even into grad school to learn a whole lot about the field of quantum computing, where I now have done most of my research. And I spent, maybe a year or so thinking about trying out different groups at Yale and figuring out what would be a nice fit for me. But I was really happy ultimately to wind up in the groups of Steve Gervin and Liang Zheng, because for me, one thing that I really value in my research is feeling a close connection to practical applications in the real world. And so this is something I felt with quantum computing. I could see the tangible potential impacts of the work I was doing on the day-to-day. It felt more, in touch with developing technology and things like this. So for me, that's always been a nice aspect of working in the field and something that I've really enjoyed. And more broadly, yeah, I've had a really fun time studying quantum. It's been a really exciting subject to pursue in my PhD, and I'll be excited to continue researching in the field afterwards.
Thanks a lot. Anne, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Anne Galen. I'm an associate dean at Yale, and my portfolio contains a lot of things, but I work with our graduate programs on policies, curriculum, and annual reviews for about 40 of our PhD programs. I also work directly with the faculty heads of the graduate programs, what we call the directors of graduate study. And I also work with some of our graduate programs on the admissions process. So I'm here, first of all, I'm not here to talk about quantum. I know nothing about quantum, so I will defer to the others on the panel about that. But I'm really here to answer any general questions you might have about graduate school. And some of the things you might want to ask me about are, what should I be thinking about or preparing in order to apply if I've decided to go? Why might I want to go to graduate school? What makes for a good application? What should I know once I get here? How do you navigate what some people call the hidden curriculum of graduate school? And what kinds of assistance, either financial or otherwise, are available in graduate school to help me achieve my goals and succeed in whatever I've come to graduate school to learn? So I'll stop there and look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you. We can start by closing the poll, and I can also share the results. And we see that everybody is very interested in having in STEM career, which is great for us. However, we have a moderate understanding on the information on the career. So that's perfect, because we're going to be able to help you figure out if going to grad school is the right move for you. There's a ton of way to join the quantum workforce. And you can also see that all the panels that we have in this series will go from enrolling to grad school to do a professorship, but also joining industry, joining a startup, and we also have alternative careers. So there's way more coming up. So we're going to start by to address the first question, and I think we're going to ask that to Emily and Connor, what it's like to work in a research group. So you join to go to grad school. It's very different than undergrads, because you don't really join a school per se. You don't have that. It's not a curriculum of classes. You have some classes for the master's degree, but you also join a research group. What it's like to work in the research group, and how did you pick the groups? And can you share your experience on your day-to-day activities?
I can go first. So it's been a little strange for me because when I joined the group I'm currently in, like the next semester, COVID hit. So a lot of it has been, remote over Zoom, just like this panel. So but in a way it's been really cool. So even though I haven't been able to get to know everyone in my group, because it is a large group with like a lot of different interests, I've gotten to know some people very well who are studying similar things to me, but then I also get to meet lots of professors and students at other universities. And so it's almost like they're in my group because we're all working on the same stuff. And so like a standard week for me would be like working with professors at like UMass Amherst or MIT and NAU, because it's the Center for Quantum Networks is really great, where they really like emphasize collaboration. So it's really interesting. And so I enjoy getting to work with these professors and then other graduate students. And I even get to work with undergrads, which is exciting. And I think that as an undergrad, I was very intimidated. When I was working in a lab, I was like intimidated by my superiors. And now I realize that like we're all just like on this pursuit to, like further the field. And so, and like people are going to respect my ideas just as much. And like I actually am contributing. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I can jump in and say a couple of things about my experience as well. Maybe I should qualify what I'm going to say by pointing out that, of course, different research groups are going to have wiring different kinds of environments. So a lot of what your experience is going to be like is going to depend on the professor you might choose to work with and how that professor runs their group and what kind of atmosphere they foster. So to say a little bit about my own experience, I'm a theorist, so I don't do any experiments myself. I wouldn't be any good at it, but I like doing pen and paper calculations and simulations. And so what that means for me and my research group on the day-to-day is maybe about 2/3 of my time in any given day is devoted mostly to my own work, either reading papers, working out problems, running simulations, this kind of thing. But, the maybe remaining 1/3 of every day is usually collaborative work, either meetings or working out problems with other people. And it's probably that portion of the day that I think is the most fun. Those will be the times when I'll chat with my research advisor. We'll try to brainstorm ways to get around challenging aspects of problems, or I'll work with other people in my group and discuss topics that we're all interested in, or attend seminars or do other things. I think similar to Emily, one of the really nice aspects about being in a PhD and getting to study interesting problems is that oftentimes it really is a very collaborative effort. So not only do I have a number of people within my own research group that I'm working with at any given time, there are also other people at other groups within the university and at other universities still. So having a very nice and collaborative research environment has been a really valuable thing that I've really appreciated, and one aspect of my research group that I've really liked. Another thing, I think, Florian, you mentioned how people wind up choosing different research advisors. One thing for me that I think was really nice is in chatting with different potential advisors, I placed a premium on being able to communicate effectively with my advisor and really get a good sense for, not only what they were interested in, but feel like we could have an easy and free exchange of ideas and that sort of thing. And that's been something really nice that has helped me a lot in my PhD, feeling like I was always on the same page as my advisor. We could work very well and effectively together. And so that's something about my own particular research environment that I've really appreciated.
Well, thank you both. And to follow up on that, we have a question in the chat. What led you to choose your respective grad school? What was you sort of hinted at like how you picked your groups, but like why the different school, and like what made you go to grad school?
Well, for one reason, it was one of the places I got in, but
which is a very valid, valid reason.
But I would say that like the best thing about like, I think for me, like going to the University of Arizona was the flexibility I was given at the beginning. So I don't feel like I am behind because I didn't go in knowing which group I wanted to be in. And so that actually gave me time to feel it out and see who I thought I would work well with. So that was really nice for me. But I do know others, like colleagues, who kind of, had to choose their group before they went to grad school. And maybe then they've realized that their advisors are not everything they were looking for in a mentor. But the nice thing is that even in those cases, I think that you can find someone else, like whether it be a postdoc or like another, because you're collaborating with so many people, you can always find somebody to help fill the needs that you have. But I did like how going to the U of A gave me the time to like in person feel out groups and see what research I wanted to do.
Yeah, in my own case, I actually I wound up applying to a large number of graduate programs because I was applying together with my girlfriend, now fiance, and we wanted to try to go to the same program. So we tried to maximize our chances and apply in many places. But so I had a couple of programs that I was looking at, and all of them seemed like they would have great research opportunities, cool things in quantum. So for me, a lot of the decision between those programs came down to some non-academic factors too. Well, maybe first I should say with regard to the academic factors, one sort of prerequisite that I used as a filter to try and determine what good programs might be is not only did I want to be able to identify a advisor at each of the potential candidate programs, someone who I had talked to and thought I could work well with, I wanted to make sure there was more than one such advisor at each of these places. Because you never know, you could go work someplace and find out that that group isn't really the way it appeared. Maybe it's not a good fit for you after all, and you don't want to be stuck out without a research group where you feel like you would be a good fit. So having someplace where it seems like there are a lot of groups that you could work nicely in and see yourself thriving and having a nice time in, at least for me, was an important factor in my decision. Another thing that in my case was kind of a deciding factor for Yale was I thought it was a really nice environment among the graduate students. So in going and visiting the program and getting to talk to the other students, everyone seemed by and large, well, I should say physics grad school can be a stressful time for sure, but people seemed by and large happy despite the stresses that are inevitable in a graduate program. And, people weren't massively overworked. They weren't working 100-hour weeks or anything crazy like this. It seemed like an environment where not only did people go and learn physics and do exciting research, but they also enjoyed it while they were doing it. And there was a nice physics graduate student community that I wanted to be a part of. So, I guess the takeaway from this being that, it's totally fine and I think important to consider also non-academic factors when looking at a graduate program, thinking about the kind of life you might have there. Because of course, 5, 6, or however many years it takes to do a PhD is a long time. And you want to think about all the different things that might contribute to your quality of life while you're there.
Do you want to chime in on explaining like how people can, like, if you have general advice on like how to pick a grad school, or like why they should choose a certain grad school, like what are the options for people and why they should choose certain grad school? What are the criteria that prospective students should choose or should look for at least? I think you're muted, Anne.
Right. So I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if that was directed at me. Sure. I think what you want to do is first think about why you want to go to graduate school. What do you want to accomplish? Do you need a graduate degree? As Connor said, graduate school, it's a long time, 5 years for many degrees, sometimes 6 if you encounter some roadblocks or something you need to switch advisors. So you really want to make sure that it's the thing for you. And what do you want to learn? Because what are the questions that really excite you? Quantum is interdisciplinary. So are there a number of people or approaches to quantum that you might want to be investigating? I think Emily talked about the fact that she's been able to explore. And, especially if you're coming straight out of undergrad, you may not be 100% sure of what about quantum is appealing. And so a place where there are a number of people whose research looks interesting to you is going to be very important. Another thing to be thinking about is, what do you hope to do when you finish a degree? And I'm not saying that to scare you. You shouldn't have your life planned out, but are you really interested in pursuing research? Are you thinking about maybe teaching high school? Are you thinking that you want to go work in industry? And different kinds of careers often require a different kind of training. And so if you're thinking, I love physics, I like the idea of quantum, but I'm really thinking I want to teach high school, you may not need to get a PhD. A master's degree might be enough. What about funding? Am I independently wealthy? Most of us are not. But graduate school, the nice thing about most PhD programs is you don't pay for them. They pay you to study, conduct research, and teach. And that's something that some students don't know, that master's degrees you usually have to pay for out of pocket or take out loans. But PhDs, usually, if it's a research institution of some repute, it's through a combination of teaching and research, you won't be paying for your degree. And so that's something to be thinking about too. And then, I think the most important thing is, what kinds of questions are the ones that you're most interested in? That'll help you. And your undergraduate advisors should be able to help you identify some programs that might be a good fit for your interests. You'll want to look up some of the faculty at the places you're thinking of and see what their specializations are. And I'm sure that Connor and Emily can weigh in on this, that you as Connor said, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You want to make sure that there's, because research interests do evolve, are there 2 or 3 people you might be interested in working with? I see in the chat that there's a question about how do you reach out to advisors at programs you're not yet accepted in or involved in. And one place to start would be the Director of Graduate Studies or the Director of Graduate Admissions. Every program has at least a Director of Graduate Studies. Some programs, because they're large enough, have a Director of Graduate Admissions. And so you could say to them, I'm really interested in your program. These are the things that are interesting. And I'd love to talk to Professor X or Professor Y. So if you're not, or I'm really interested in X and Y, I'm not sure which of your faculty are the ones that I might want to contact, but can you tell me about your program? So that's one way to start that process. If you've read something of someone's, or you have heard, or your undergraduate advisor says to you, given your interest, you might be interested in going to the University of X and working with Professor Y, then you can just write an email to Professor Y and say, dear Professor Y, my undergraduate advisor, I've been getting a degree in physics or computer science or engineering. My advisor, I'm interested in graduate school. My advisor told me that your research is very much in line with the things I'm interested in exploring. Would you have some time to speak to me? And now we can do that virtually. If you're local, you want to try and go visit so you could actually meet them. I think Emily's point about understanding the community you're trying to join is really important. But you really want to be doing your homework so that you can figure out what are the places that might be a good fit for what you want to accomplish.
And once you pick your grad school, I know that Yale has that, and I'm sure the University of Arizona has it too. There's something called rotation or circulation. And so you pick a group for one semester and sort of a trial. Connor and Emily, can you have you done this? Have you taken the opportunity to do this? And did you switch? Did you stay with the professor? What were your experience with that?
Yeah, so I switched around the first 3 semesters. At the U of A, it's you can take independent studies alongside your classes. And so that's common, is that you would take 2 classes and your independent study up until you have like your master's, and that independent study will just be you working with a different group. And here it was nice because you're getting funded through your TAing initially, so if you are not enjoying one of the groups that you're in, it doesn't put a ton of pressure on you to like have to get certain results and things like that for like any funding purposes. But yeah, so I started off in like a nuclear theory group. And then the next semester I went into a biophysics lab, and then I realized, nope, I would much rather be a theorist. So then I went back to what I knew I loved, and I joined the quantum photonics applications group, which it was nice. And I chose it because they have experimentalists in it, and they have theorists, and they have everything like in between. So I figured I could probably just spend the rest of my time in this group and try out everything I want to my heart's content.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and quickly add that I think I had a pretty similar experience to Emily, at least within the physics department here at Yale. There isn't a formal rotation system. And so what I did was during my first semester here, I actually just sort of worked informally in a couple of groups, mainly just kind of doing informal reading, seeing what they were working on, getting a sense for what the research was like. And through that process, I got a sense of maybe which of the 2 groups I was looking at seemed like it would be a better fit for me. And then started doing some very, very basic low time commitment research with them during my first academic year. Here at Yale, it's the first 2 years you teach, and so that's what supports you during the academic years. And so similar to as Emily said, then it's nice because you don't have to have the pressure to be funded by your research group during those first 2 academic years. So you can put in as much time as you're able while also focusing on teaching in classes. And so it gives you a little bit of a period to try out some different research groups. I should say that not all programs work this way. I think there are some where you're funded directly by research groups, or you can be as soon as you sort of set foot in the program. So, looking at different programs and trying to understand the different funding models is actually something that can be important and relevant to you as someone potentially considering graduate school, because that can definitely have an impact on your experience, or more generally just the flexibility you might have in exploring different groups.
Yes, funding is the name of the game, and I'm going to flash on my screen. If you go on any of the website of the grad school, usually you have a tab with resources, and the first thing that pops in is the funding and the grants, because of course you need to get your fundings. There's no need of going to grad school if it's to just crash and burn and then not having any money. And one thing that often pays is the teaching. You talked about both of them talked about that, and we have a question in the chat. Somebody's interested in hearing your thoughts on the teaching side. How much time does it take? And do you wish it was more teaching, less teaching? What's the balance? Yeah, and so the person said that teaching is not something that he particularly enjoy. Oh, sorry, they particularly enjoy, and they are worried it's going to be a burden. Like, can you give us the ratio of time you spend preparing classes and TAing?
I think that really depends on both the class you're TAing and where you're doing it. I know that at the U of A, you can be a grader. So if you don't enjoy standing up in front of people, or like maybe you don't want to have those like interactions, like there is the option to be a grader, in which case you never actually interact with the students, you just interact with the professors. That, however, is my least favorite part of teaching. And so I'm a slow grader, and I don't find it rewarding at all. So I much prefer when I'm teaching labs and discussions. But I know that in the physics department at the U of A, the time commitment it varies so much depending on the class, because it'll be like if you're doing discussions, maybe you only really need to be there for the discussion times, but then there's not much to grade or prepare ahead of time. And then, but if you're doing labs, you may have to like help set up and then grade the lab reports or grade tests. So I know that they emphasize that you shouldn't be spending more than 20 hours a week on TAing, because that's all you're really getting paid for. Is you get paid to be a part-time teacher, and then the other part-time you're being a student. but I do know that it can be difficult for some people to balance. So if you can talk, if I would recommend that if you get into a program, perhaps talk to some of the students there and they'll have an idea of like what are the classes that would work best for you. But I really love TAing because I almost went to grad school for like physics education research. So now I'm funded through my research, so I don't need to TA, but instead I'm trying to come up with nice outreach opportunities so that I can still fulfill that like part of myself.
And you were trying to say something?
I was just going to say that it really depends both the amount of teaching, whether it's 20 hours a week or 10 hours a week, the kinds of courses, whether you're leading a section or whether you're doing grading really will depend on the school and the research group. And so, you know, physics students may be asked to teach a different amount than computer science students, say at Yale. So it really, there's a great deal of variety. I think one thing to know is, at least at Yale, we have a training program for first-time teachers. So people who may say, oh my God, I don't know how, I can't stand in front of a classroom. I don't, you know, that isn't me. There are a lot of tools to help you become a better teacher. But I'd also say it also, you know, depending upon what program you enter, some programs won't allow students to teach in their first year. Some students start teaching their very first year. It really, what you want to do is, you know, do your homework. The nice thing is everything's on the web. You can usually find out when you go to the department that you're thinking of joining when the teaching is and at what level. And if they have, usually you're not just thrown out into the classroom and asked to sink or swim. Usually there are people there to help you learn how to do this well. And you may find that it's something that you didn't think you liked, but then there's a particular aspect you really like, as Emily said, that she loves the interpersonal aspect, but doesn't like the grading. And you might find that actually you find the grading, or even just being there. Sometimes TAs are there to help answer questions. You know, sometimes it's not, you're not actually leading a section. You may find that one-on-one work is something that you really enjoy. So I think there are various forms of teaching, and whatever's in, you know, whatever program and institution you're thinking of joining, you'd want to ask about that. What does it look like, and what are the different kinds of opportunities available to you?
It looks like somebody asked, if you're a TA, do you need to develop your own curriculum for the class? So I would say that's unlikely. I know at the U of A, there's opportunities to be like a summer course teacher, in which case I assume you have more like control over the curriculum. But I know that in my experience, it's been like the worksheets and the lab books and the labs and everything is already set up. And then you mainly just like alter it so that it like works for your students in the room. So like you would give an introduction based off of what you think they know, or what they've like learned from you in the previous labs. And then maybe you realize that you have a very slow group. So you like might like take certain parts out that are less important. But that was my experience. So I think that's less that you create the curriculum and more of you just kind of apply it to the students.
I would add that I think that's probably pretty typical. I think most programs know that not everyone maybe is interested in doing a whole lot of teaching or developing their own materials. And so they probably try to minimize the amount of time you would have to do that. Certainly here at Yale, most of the teaching assignments are exactly the kind of thing Emily described. But I will say on the flip side of that, if you're someone who is interested in teaching, I happen to also be very interested in teaching and have tried to really make it an important part of my graduate school experience. Opportunities to, for instance, design your own curriculum can also be very exciting things. So those are some things I've sought out. And actually one aspect for me of my graduate experience that I've really enjoyed is being in an environment where there are a lot of resources surrounding teaching. So you can get involved in the teaching community here more broadly, learn about how to be a better and more effective teacher. And so, you know, whether teaching is a plus or minus for you, I think it's certainly something that's worth considering when looking at different programs, and important to bear in mind all of the different ways that it might affect your experience. For me, it's been a huge positive here. I've joined Yale Center for Teaching and Learning, helping to teach other new graduate students how to teach. That's all something I've really enjoyed. But for other people who don't like teaching, Yale's also been a nice option as an example, because the required number of teaching hours per week is only 10 within the first 2 years. So comparatively, I think that's a fairly small number. But all sorts of different programs are going to have different pros and cons. It's really going to come down to doing your research and seeing how the particular program might fit with your interest.
So I was gonna
Go ahead, Russ.
I was just going to chime in for a second. So even though my background's not related to quantum, going through grad school, I did a lot of teaching of lab sections in geology, since that's what my degree is in. And I loved it. I loved teaching as a graduate student. And kind of speaking to the question of developing your own curriculum, one of the ways that I actually got funded was by helping develop the lab curriculum. So it'll probably be a little bit different in engineering and physics, but there are those types of opportunities where you can definitely kind of shape the curriculum if that's something you're interested in. But generally, you're not expected to, just from my experience. So.
All right, that's good. Thank you all. So we have more and more. Oh, go ahead. Do you want to say something more?
Sorry, I saw that someone that said, like, if you do enjoy teaching, like, what should you look for in a school? I was going to say that if you see that a school has like a professor who focuses on like physics education research or something like that, that's probably going to be a like incentivize going there, because like that they're going to be keeping up with research, and they're going to be like willing to like actually study what's going on in the classroom, whereas other schools may just kind of have outdated materials, which I know can become frustrating to have to teach, even if you enjoy teaching.
One other quick detail on this point I just mentioned is many schools will also have centers for teaching and learning, which could be a good contact point for you if you aren't interested in teaching. They could tell you what the experience is like and resources you could find if you wanted to further explore that interest. But that's not a thing that's present at all schools. So if you are interested, that would be a good sign and a place you could find out more.
And also, depending on what you're going to do with your PhD, if you want to join industry, teaching is not going to be as important as if you want to become a professor and have your own group, because you will be required to create curriculum. And so it really depends on what's your career goal at the end. So it's something that you might want. I know that 5 to 6, 7 years is like a long time, but you really need to come in with a plan, because you might struggle to find the motivation, because it's a very long time if you sort of don't know what's the end goal is. You shouldn't really join a PhD program just because you get to be called a doctor at the end, which is great. We love it. But it's a lot of struggle. And there's a ton of question in the chat about stress and struggle. And also a lot about the funding. Maybe we're going to go with the stress one first, so we don't end up on a note too bleak. But it's true that a lot of grad students have period of stress. Some develop some depression. Is there any tools that the grad school has in place to help these kind of students?
Sure. I'm happy to take that. And then if Connor and Emily want to speak from their personal experience, I think graduate school is the best of times and the worst of times. And I think it's exciting because you're focusing on exactly what you want to think about and spend your time thinking about, and you're with like-minded people. But there's a lot of pressure to get things done in a timely fashion. Research sometimes hits a dead end. There may be problems with an advisor. And then, all kinds of life can interfere. You can get sick. I think when you're looking at graduate schools, first of all, there are two things to consider. One is you should always feel as though part of your education is asking for help. No one knows how to do graduate school until they've done it. So you just ask questions. There's no such thing as a bad or a stupid question. And you could be asking them of faculty. You can be asking them of your co-students. So there may be an older student that you get to know. But never be afraid to say, I don't know where to go to do X, or I'm interested in X. Where can I learn more about it? Or I'm really struggling with Y. Do you have any suggestions about what I might do or whom I might talk to? And I can't speak to every institution, but I would say most institutions have an Office of Student Life who will help you think about, how you bring together the intellectual and the personal side of, meeting people, issues with housing, those kinds of things. Many schools have really amped up their mental health and counseling, and I think stress is a big thing, but they're also wellness centers. And so I think knowing, having a good sense of when things are not going right for you, and not being shy about asking for help, and seeking counseling if you need it. There's career services. There's the Center for Teaching and Learning, as Connor mentioned. There's a writing center at most places. So if you're struggling, to really put your ideas down on paper, that's a place to go. And struggle can take any number of different forms. What I would say is almost every student will have some challenge that they face in the 4 to 6 years that they're in graduate school. And that's not a sign that something's wrong with you. That's just a sign that it's hard. And I think that your job when you encounter a challenge is to find the right resources. And if you don't know, just ask as many people as you can. Your director of graduate studies should be able to help you with this. The dean's office should be able to help you with this. So, if you don't know where to start, those are often good places to start. There's no sort of magic formula, but I think the main thing is to know yourself and know when you can't handle something on your own. I think graduate school is set up for people to ask for help. That's why we have all these other offices, and no one expects students to just magically know how to do this. You don't know how to write a dissertation until you've written a dissertation. So I think the main thing is not to be shy. I would say the most successful students take advantage of all the resources that are available to them. And I'm going to stop there and let Connor and Emily jump in.
And before you do that, I also want to point out that I've been through grad school, and the pattern that I've seen is that you start very excited about it. You're a brand new student, it's very nice, and then your advisor can help you because he has all the answer for now, because you still learn about the field. And then you slowly realize that you're gonna start to research a topic that you are the only one, or one of the few in the world who know the answer. And no Googling, no book, no anything will help you, because you are on the verge of knowledge, and you're discovering new things. And it's also a very stressing time, because you feel that you're on your own, and then this is what you need the help of all your colleagues, but also you need to sort of internalize the fact that it's a hard job, and then you're gonna go through. This is not too difficult. This is pretty good. And one thing that really helped me is to find mentor that can help you. Often I've realized that the admins, so not the PIs, but people helping, either some associate dean, some manager in centers, and people like this, working with students and doing programming are usually very helpful. When I was doing my PhD in France, we had one of the admin who was sort of my confidant, and when something went wrong, I just went and ran to him, and it was just talking about it really helped. So that's something that you should really consider, looking for mentor and asking for help, like Anne said. Connor and Emily, how stressed were you during your PhD? At least, Connor, that's now that you're done, you should look back and be like, oh, that's nice. And Emily, I hope you're not too stressed yet.
For me, it definitely oscillates with stress. I've been more stressed out in grad school than I've ever been before, but then also there's just been lots of external to grad school stressors that are coinciding with, trying to get my master's and continuing the program and things. So you just have to try to balance that. Yes, you want to get your PhD, but you also need to live a balanced, healthy life, and the people, your advisors and your peers and stuff should be rooting for you. So do what you need to do to survive. but there are certain like stressors that I've seen cause like friends of mine to choose to not to continue with their PhD and instead of master out of the program. And so I think those are important to be aware of so that you can maybe avoid them. So some friends of mine maybe would lose their funding. So, and that was the only group that they were interested in being in. And so like, it's hard to do a lot of serious research and TA and do everything, you know, all at the same time when you're not getting funding for all of like the research work you're doing. So that's one thing, is like, it is good to know. And I think it is okay to ask professors if they have funding for you like ahead of time, and like how many students maybe they're expecting to take on in the future. And then also asking other graduate students in the group questions like this. So if you know there's a professor you want to work with, like you can maybe ask them, or just directly email students in the group to see if they believe that there's funding, but also if it's like a pleasant work experience, because there's lots of really talented people out there who push their graduate students very hard and they have very high expectations. And maybe that's not something that you want or like can withstand because you are doing other things in your life and you are taking classes and there are other responsibilities. And then also just being aware of the like, not only like the department that you're going to be joining, but like the general area of your program. So like I've had friends who moved here to Tucson who then realized that the Jewish community isn't quite as large as they'd like it to be, and that made their life very difficult. And you know, maybe the U of A doesn't take off certain holidays that they do take off, so then they're not able to like have all the tools they think they need to be happy on their own, let alone then to have to endure the stresses of the PhD program. So like it is important, like I'm not saying you should choose a school based only off of the area it's in, but that can be an important factor in if you are going to make it through your program.
I think the issues that I'm hearing from you, and I think Connor raised earlier, are community. So making sure you have the kinds of communities you're going to need to thrive. So if you're someone who's very religious and wants to and you know, make sure that there's a religious community that is either on campus or off campus that is going to really be supporting you during these years. And communication, which Connor brought up earlier, really trying to suss out whether you are going to get on well with your advisor and that you're going to be able to talk directly with them about anything that arises, and whether it's a work-life balance or taking the research in a certain direction, someone you feel you're going to be comfortable working with. That's one of the prime ways that you can avoid problems downstream. And sometimes that's tough to tell when you're applying. I think sometimes you don't know until you're there, but it's certainly something. This is one of the reasons why, if there are only one or two people at an institution that you think you want to work with, you should be talking to them before you even apply, to see whether their interpersonal style and yours are going to mesh.
I'd add just one other quick comment on this topic, maybe before we move on. I wanted actually to emphasize some of the things that Anne and Florian mentioned earlier about the importance of knowing what resources are available to you and asking for help when you need it, insofar as a mechanism to fight off stress. So for instance, in my own experience and many other graduate students' experiences, one challenging thing to deal with in graduate school can be imposter syndrome, as one example, where you feel like, you know, maybe your research isn't exciting enough, or you're not doing well enough, or you're not smart enough to be in the program. This kind of thing it can be a common sentiment. And I think for me personally, this is something I struggled with early on in the program, because I didn't realize all of the resources I had access to. I wasn't talking to the older members in my group to try and get help when I was stuck on problems. I wasn't, leveraging some of the other resources that were available to me in my group and others in the Quantum Center and so on. And so I do think, I just wanted to emphasize from personal experience that knowing about the resources that are available to you and understanding that it is the expectation that it takes time to learn about a topic in a field, and it's okay to not know things and ask questions. And, this is all important things that everyone has to do at some point. So for me, it took a while to come to that realization, and that was stressful. But, having other people around to help you through that, it can be a really important thing.
Okay, we have a lot more question about fundings. So there's different way of funding. So we talked about how to get funding through TA, but there's also fellowship and anything. Connor, you had a fellowship with the NSF. Can you tell us a little bit more what was the process and how you got that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of my funding while I was a graduate student came through an NSF Graduate Research Fellowship. And so the way that worked was it was actually my second year of graduate school. I submitted an application during the fall where I proposed the kind of research I would be doing for my PhD. And there were other components as well. And they came back and offered me funding for 3 more years after that. So then in the subsequent 3 years, that is where my funding came from. So I didn't have to teach, and I also didn't have to ask my advisor to provide me with support out of one of their grants. So the nice aspect of something like that is that it can give you a little bit more flexibility to work on whatever it is you're interested in. So when you have your own funding source, you can go to potential advisors and say, I'm interested in this topic. Can you work with me on this? And they don't have to worry about finding money from a grant to help you with it. So it can give you a little bit more flexibility in that way. And so I think fellowships in that regard can be a useful thing, certainly for you as a student.
And you can apply for fellowships either as an undergraduate to use in graduate school or while you're in graduate school. Usually an undergraduate institution will have a fellowships office, and so you can start with them. And then often the graduate school will have either an office or a site where you can look for fellowships that might be pertinent to you. There are a number of sort of big name fellowships that many people get, like Fulbrights, which are to travel elsewhere. And most campuses will have somebody who can help you with that. I'd also say that the Writing Center can help you with applications, even if there isn't a fellowship office. So there are a lot of different ways that you can find funding. But I want to repeat that if you're applying to, say, an R1 institution like Yale, you're going to get 5 years of funding. It may be that you have to find a research group that will accept you, but I would say there are very few instances I know of where someone had to leave graduate school because they had no funding. So that's something to just reassure people on. It's something that you want to be aware of, but chances are once you have gotten into a program, if it's an R1, a research one institution, unless you have a major disagreement with the single person who does research in your area, you should be okay.
And there's also a lot more initiative lately. The US government has created these national quantum centers. We have hubs everywhere. And so these centers have a lot of fundings, and including in the fundings that they receive from the government, they have fellowships for graduate students, for postdocs. And so you might be able to go check on these websites. There's also the national labs are often associated with these hubs, these quantum hubs. And so you might be able to find different ways to have resources. I think the easiest way is to get paid by the grad school, so you don't have to write anything. So it's sort of like the carefree thing. It's not available to anybody, but there's also other options. And also, I know that sometimes people can partner with, university can partner with industry, and the industry will pay for a chunk of the funding. So that's also happens. That happened also a lot in Europe. There's some of these private government partnership. So that's also something that you can consider depending on where you want to go for grad school. So we're almost out of time. I think maybe what we can do is we can take one last question, talking about the timeline of applying to grad school. Like, what are the deadlines and what are the time that we need to go through?
So I was just typing an answer to that question because it seemed like one. What I would say is our application at Yale opens in August, and depending upon the program, the deadline can be December 1st, December 15th, or January 1st. And so if you are thinking of applying, you really want to have your materials ready. You'll, I'm going to try and fold in another question, which is what do you need to do to apply? But let me talk about the timeline, and then I'll try and tell you the biggest pieces of getting ready to apply. So then usually, depending upon the program, there may be an on-campus visit that is arranged or a virtual visit. And some schools do that before acceptance decisions are made, and some schools do it after decisions are made. And even that can vary within programs. Usually in early spring, January and February, decisions are made. And then the students who have been admitted have to make a decision by April 15th. So that's the rough timeline, but I would say if you're thinking of specific schools, you should go and look at the school's website, and they will have a more specific timeline. The things that you want to focus on in your application are really research. In the sciences, that's the key issue. And it's also the determining issue for those who really thrive in graduate school in the sciences. Faculty are looking for students with prior research experience. And you want in your statement of purpose, which is different from an undergraduate personal statement, to really answer questions about why do you want to come to graduate school? What are the questions or problems that really interest you? What have you done to prepare to work on these? And why is the institution that you're planning to come to or applying to the right place for you to do this? And that means knowing who the faculty are and what kind of research they're working on. So the statement of purpose is really key, and prior research experience is also really key. I would say the third piece that's really important is letters of recommendation, because those are and you want to get them as strong, at least 3 strong letters from people who know your work, have seen you do research, and know you as a person. And I could say more about that, but I noticed the time and I don't want to keep anybody.
Sounds good. We're almost out of time. Maybe while I flash the next event for the series, maybe we can go around and have a last few words from each of you, and the last advice that you can give people considering grad school. Sorry, I should have named. Conrad, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So advice broadly for people considering grad school is a very broad category. So I don't know that I can say something that's going to be of interest to everyone here. But I think one thing that for me was very helpful in this process was just speaking to students at the different programs I was looking at. You know, a lot of the questions I think have been posed here are things that people who have been through the program can readily answer for you and really speak to how it affected their experience, whether these different factors were positive or negatives. And so, you know, I think talking to students as you look at different programs should be a crucial determining factor in, you know, gathering information. So not only can you talk to people about the structure of the graduate program or the department as a whole, but you can also talk to people in a particular research group to get a sense of what it's like to work with a particular advisor. Is the environment stressful? What are the expectations on students? You know, I think this is all information you can gather before you accept or even apply to certain programs to try and whittle down your choices. And so for me, at least, certainly this was really valuable information. And for those considering graduate school, I would say if you're on the fence about different programs or different areas of research, definitely talk to some of the students there. They can certainly help point you in the right direction.
The word of the end, Emily?
Emily, do you want to go next?
Oh, sorry, I was responding to a question. What was the question?
What's your last final words on this? Like, last piece of advice you can give our audience before we conclude the panel? If you don't have it, that's fine.
I think that, yeah, I think that just, even if you're embarrassed to ask a question about something, like it's better to ask and have someone hopefully answer it for you. So emailing professors if you want to work with them, emailing like other people who have positions in the department, stuff like that. That's a great way to gather information. And even just like directly emailing students is a great way to get information. Or if you can visit on site, like that's like walking around and talking to people in person. It's totally worth it. And but if you're emailing professors and they aren't replying, do not take it personally. I know that lots of them just have so many emails every day. And like, I have a hard time getting responses from my advisor sometimes, depending on how busy he is. So if you're really interested with working with someone in particular, I would send follow-up emails and things like that without thinking you're bugging them or thinking that they're ignoring you. It's much more likely that it's just lost in the stream of emails they get.
So I would say, don't be afraid to aim high. You know, ask a lot of questions. Do your homework and your research to find out who's doing what where. And don't be afraid to ask for help at any stage along the way.
Russ, alas, yeah, I guess that's time. Yale is shutting down my lights.
Shutting you down. I'll just echo what everybody else has said. It's really important to do your homework in terms of, you know, or do as much homework as you can, because once you make a choice, you know, you're kind of there and you want to make the best of it and not have to switch or anything like that. So doing all your homework ahead of time will really help with all that and asking all those important questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you for all the attendees who came in and asked a question. This will be recorded and put later on our website. So you'll be able to have all the answer again if you missed something. Thank you all to our panelists and have a good night.